Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Techno Talks here. So in today's video, we're going to be doing yet another speed test, and this time in front of us we have the newly released iPhone 14 Pro and kind of newly released Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 4. So quickly, let's go ahead and talk about the specs on both these devices. The iPhone 14 Pro has the Apple A16 Bionic chipset, their newest chipset, plus it has 6GB of RAM, and then the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 4 has the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 chipset, and then it also has 12GB of RAM. So what we're basically going to be doing is we're going to do a boot up test, which is going to be our first test, and then we're going to have an app launching test, which I'm basically going to be setting up some apps, which we're going to be launching at the same time on both to see which one opens up faster. And then we have a RAM management test where I go ahead and click those same apps and just see if they reload or if it was able to keep it in the RAM. And then the final test is going to be a Geekbench test, and once we're done with that, that'll basically give us our results. So this won't really affect day-to-day usage. These speed tests usually don't have too many differences between each other. Even when I'm comparing other devices, there are very minimal differences between them, and so this shouldn't really affect you too much. But again, there are still people that like to watch these, so I go ahead and make these for y'all. So right away, let's go ahead and begin with our boot up test. So let's grab both these devices and holding the power button. All right, let's go ahead and see which one opens up first. So both of them are loading up the animations. Samsung Galaxy and then the Apple. All right, so the iPhone 14 Pro did boot up faster by a couple seconds actually. And the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 4 just caught up. So the Z Fold 4 did take a little longer than the iPhone 14 Pro, and that is something I've been noticing on the Z Fold 4 during my usage. The Z Fold 4 has been taking some time to boot up whenever I shut it down or whatnot when I'm not using it for a little while, and so I don't know why that's happening even compared to my S22 Plus, which has a lower end chipset, which is the 8 Gen 1 instead of the 8 Plus Gen 1 chipset. It still is faster than the Z Fold 4. Might be some software things, but I don't really know. So the iPhone 14 Pro does take that. So let's go to move on to our app screen. And here is our app screen right here. Let me go ahead and bring up the brightness for y'all real quick. Alrighty, and let's go ahead and open up the Z Fold 4 so we get a better large display experience right here. Alright, so first up, I'm going to start with some basic apps. The phones always have a calculator, calendar, clock, and then the camera app. And then I'm going to move on to some social media apps like Instagram and Twitter, and then we have Groupon and ESPN. Plus we have Amazon, eBay, YouTube, Starbucks, and then I have 4 games. 2 of them don't really use too much. They're pretty easy to open up. That's going to be Smash Your Road Wanted and Temple Run 2, and then I have Asphalt 9 and Dead Trigger 2, which do need a little more power than the other games. So let me go ahead and actually change the brightness on this from auto brightness. Let me get that turned off. Alright, let's see. And then let's go ahead and turn this one up. Alright, so let's go ahead and begin. So first up we have our calculator in 3, 2, 1. So that was the same for both the devices. Let's move on to our calendar in 3, 2, 1. That was the iPhone 14 Pro, just by a tad bit. Again, these are very small differences between the two devices, so you can't really compare them like this, but again, people want to see this. So the clock in 3, 2, 1. Alright, they were both at the same time, except the Z Fold 4 has a different animation, so it makes it look like it takes a longer time. However, that was the same time. Let's get into our camera real quick. Alright, that was, I think they switched on at the same time. Not really sure about that one. You can go ahead and leave a comment down below if I do mess up something. So now let's move on to our Instagram. Let's get Instagram open in 3, 2, 1. Alright, seems like it was the Z Fold 4 that loaded in the last thing first. And then let's move on to our Twitter, which is going to be the Z Fold 4. So it got the final tweets in first on the iPhone. Let's move on to Groupon in 3, 2, 1. Now Alright, so that was the iPhone. Even though it had some pop-up, the iPhone still had it loaded in, still had the main screen loaded in first. Let's move on to our ESPN in 3, 2, 1. Alright, that's going to be the iPhone again. So it loads in a little faster than the Z Fold 4. Now, let's move on to Amazon in 3, 2, 1. Here we have the Z Fold 4 that loaded Amazon in first, and then eBay. I'm guessing that was the Z Fold 4 again. The first animation for the home screen did take a little longer on the iPhone. Now let's move on to YouTube and Starbucks. So here we have YouTube. Alright, seems like the iPhone was a tad bit faster maybe? Or was that the Z Fold 4? They both loaded in something separate at the same time and then they changed it up to the same thing. So I was kind of confused right there. Let's move on to Starbucks. Alright, that's going to be the Z Fold 4. Again, these are both connected to the same Wi-Fi, so we shouldn't have any Wi-Fi issues unless usually Samsung devices do have a better wireless Wi-Fi receiver than iPhones, and I've actually tested this out, and that's what usually happens. But again, they are still connected to the same Wi-Fi, except they're both limited by whichever receiver they're using. Now, let's move on to our game. So Smash Road Wanted in 3, 2, 1. Go ahead and see. Usually iPhones load up games faster, and again, that is what happened. So let's go ahead and close out right there. Let's move on to Temple Run 2. Alright. Both super quick at loading these games. Both are very similar to each other. I think that's going to be the iPhone just by a millisecond again. These devices are both flagship devices. They do have a really high price on both of them, except the Z Fold 4. Does cost a tad bit more. You could probably get two iPhone 14 Pros for the Z Fold 4, but again, they are both flagship level devices, and they both do have very great chipsets, and they are both super fast. So when doing these comparisons, you're only going to get like these millisecond differences unless there's an issue. So Asphalt 9. All right. So these games are a little heavier. They do use more of the GPU, but again, that was the Z Fold 4, which is actually kind of confusing because usually the iPhone takes these, but I guess the Z Fold 4 is better today. So let's go ahead and go on to Dead Trigger 2, which is our final game in 3, 2, 1, and boom. Let's go ahead and see. So that was the iPhone for the loading screen, and then we're gonna click play at the same time. All right, let's see. Seems like the iPhone is gonna take this by just a millisecond again. Let's see. Alright, almost there. And here we have it. Yep, the iPhone takes it just by a little bit. Again, not too many differences. So app launching test. Sometimes the Z Fold 4 won, sometimes the iPhone won. And so I'm gonna go ahead and give it a tie, as even when there were differences, they were by milliseconds. So every year when I make these tests, the differences keep getting smaller and smaller between the two devices, and I guess maybe in a couple of years we might not see any differences, so we might not be doing speed tests anymore. Alright, so now let's move on to our RAM management test. Basically, I have all of the apps still open, as you can see. I don't want to accidentally close out on any of them. And so alright, so I have them all open, and now we can go ahead and start from the top again and see if any of them need reload. So let's quickly go through. Calculator still there. These apps probably, even if they did have reloads, you probably wouldn't notice, as they are the stock apps that you're using and they don't really need anything. Calculator and like your camera or the calendar. So now let's move on to our Instagram, which we don't have any reloads here. Twitter, no reloads. Groupon, again, no reloads. ESPN, still no reloads, so keeping up really well. And the iPhone, even with 6 gigabytes of RAM, when the Z Fold 4 has double that, is still keeping up. And that is one of the things with Apple. They don't really need too much on their phones to actually keep up with the competition. So let's move on to eBay. Still no reloads here. YouTube, again, no reloads. Starbucks, still no reloads. Really nice test. If I don't get any reloads on both these devices, this is going to be great. So Smashy Road Wanted, still no reloads. And Temple Run 2, Still no reload. So final 2 apps left, and we still don't have any reloads on any of these devices. Asphalt 9, oops. Asphalt 9, still no reloads again. These devices are performing really well right now, and I have actually noticed this in day-to-day usage with the Z Fold 4 and the 14 Pro. Well, compared to the 13 Pro, the 14 Pro isn't really too much of an upgrade, but the Z Fold 4 is really good, and I don't know, I haven't had any stutters, no lags with this device, and it's probably one of the best Samsung experiences I've had, and I actually prefer using Samsung devices on my day-to-day usage. So being able to have a device like this is really great. So no reloads on Dead Trigger 2 as well. So basically it's a tie again. So none of the apps had to reload. RAM management is great on both these devices. And so now we can move on to our final test. Our final test is going to be a Geekbench 5 benchmark test. So these benchmarks, usually Apple takes these, they do always get the higher scores. They're usually just better chipsets, I guess. And so the iPhone probably will take it again, but we have to see. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So let's go ahead and open up Geekbench 5. We have all the background apps closed, and now let's go ahead and wait and run our CPU benchmark. So run CPU benchmark in 3, 2, 1. All right, so this is gonna take a little while, like 40-45 seconds. I don't want to keep y'all waiting, so I'm gonna go ahead and pause the video right here and get back to y'all once the scores are ready. All right, so here we have our scores, and as you can see, the iPhone does take it by a significant amount. So with the Z Fold 4, for the single core we got 1333, and for the iPhone we got 1883. So the iPhone does take it by around 500 points, and for the multi-core, again, for the Z Fold 4 we got 3546 and we got 5349 for the iPhone. So there's almost a 2000 point difference right there, and the iPhone definitely takes this. So Apple, in all of my speed tests, has always taken these. They sometimes did miss out on the single cores. However, this year with the A16, it's really not too much of an upgrade compared to the A15 Bionic on the 13 Pro, but still, they don't really need to do too much as the competition still hasn't been able to keep up with them. But one thing I'd like to say right here, even though the iPhone on paper does get the better scores and the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 4 doesn't, day-to-day usage, you're really not going to notice it. Unless you're rendering or you're editing videos and stuff on your phone or on your smartphone or on your Z Fold 4 or iPhone 14 Pro, then you're not going to notice it at all. These Geekbench scores just test everything to the limit, unless you're playing, let's say maybe Genshin Impact. That might affect it, as that is a pretty heavy game. It's a pretty heavy game on the CPU and the GPU of these devices, and so the iPhone usually does take it by on paper again, as I said. However, day-to-day usage, you're not going to notice it, and as you saw right there, when we were launching the apps, some apps launched faster on the Z Fold 4, some did on the iPhone 14 Pro, and these were only by milliseconds, and even on the RAM management test, they kept everything open. So these scores aren't everything. These shouldn't be the reason why you buy a device, but again, it's good to know what the scores are for both these devices and how they're performing. So that is basically going to wrap it up for this video. The iPhone does win this by 1 point, as actually 2 points, as it won the Bootup Test and the Geekbench score test. However, everything else was a tie, so the iPhone does take it by 2 points, but that is basically it. So if you did enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe, as it helps support the channel. And if you guys do have some suggestions for these speed test videos, I've seen a couple comments by some people where they asked for some other things. Again, if you do have any suggestions, just go ahead and leave them down in the comments below, and I will make sure to respond to those. So see y'all in the next one.